Welcome back. You're still watching Your Story on SA Today. Now, delegates from the African Telecommunications Union, the ATU, have urged African countries to invest in new technologies in order to bridge the digital divide and prepare for the fourth industrial revolution. The delegates were speaking at a preparatory meeting held in East London ahead of the World Radio Communication Conference to be held in Egypt in November. Our reporter Yanga Funani attended the meeting and caught up with Communications Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams.
A very good afternoon to you and to our viewers at home. You're coming to us from the East London ICC, where the fourth preparatory meeting is currently concluding. It is a build-up to the World Radio Communication Conference, which is to be held in November in Egypt. At the center of the conversation were issues of connectivity and increasing the spectrum to ensure that the general public, African public, gets to enjoy ICT technologies. Joining us is the Minister of Communications, Ma'am Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. Thank you very much for joining us, ma'am.
Thank you, Buddha, and thank you for having me.
Tell us about this fourth final meeting.
Well, today we gathered here in East London. As you know, that it has been from Monday until now, where we have the different experts from the regulatory environment, the industry and governments coming together from the African region to say, how do we make sure that as we march towards the World Radio Conference 19 in Egypt, that is going to be held in Egypt in November, we speak with one voice as Africa. Therefore, we gathered the teams, try to have consensus here and there. Of course, we could not get 100% as we were hoping for, but we're happy that at least 96% of the things that we discussed is what we agreed on, and those that have differences in certain areas, we've allowed them that they can go and lobby outside the platform that we are, as South Africa will be leading that delegation that's going to Egypt.
I understand that this will play a critical role in ensuring that Africa speaks with one voice, something which has been lacking over the years. What's different now?
I think what's different is that we have learned that our divisions are not helping the growth of the continent. In most cases, you will realize that most countries, they live on Africa. They get support from Africa, but it's not for the advantage of Africa. Now we said, how do we utilize and ride on the wave that we have about 1.3 billion market that everybody is looking for? How do we speak with one voice to try to say, even if you're going to get out and ask for assistance in terms of investors, let that be on our terms. Let us make sure that it is Africa first and the rest follows. And this seeks to say, even if people are going to be leaving their countries, going to Egypt and will be lobbied, but they must think about the 1.3 billion people that we are representing, Africa first in everything.
Okay, let's talk about the issues of connectivity. Most parts of Africa are still rural and not benefiting from issues of connectivity to a point where you are speaking now of 5G. Let's talk about that.
Well, we do appreciate the fact, for example, just here in South Africa alone, we've got about 20 million unconnected people out of the entire population, which is something that as government we have said, let's take a bold step towards. But as government, we cannot do alone. That is why we appreciate and continue to encourage the role played by the private sector. But now as government, if we're going to sit back and not provide a creating environment through the legislation and the regulations, then we're not going to be able to achieve that. We've set a target for ourselves. As you know, that we said we want to lead the fourth industrial revolution, and there can never be any fourth industrial revolution without people being connected, as we talk about connection of everything. So as South Africa, we have said what else must be done to make sure that we leverage on the investment that must be done by private sector. We are hoping that the investment conference that is coming and the spectrum policy directive that the minister has issued will really help us South Africans mark and make a difference in that we want to achieve. Of course, as we talk about Africa, not just because we are South Africa, next year the President of South Africa will be taking over the AU chairship, and that means therefore he will be responsible for development of the entire continent, of course in a themed environment. Ours is to say, how do we work together building on the strength? If you're looking at countries like Nigeria, looking at Rwanda, looking at Kenya, they're doing so well in certain areas. How do we complement each other? But most importantly, how do we get to coordinate each other so that we can collaborate for effective execution? Therefore, that is why we are here to say, you have weaknesses in Kenya, I have weaknesses in South South Africa. Botswana has strengths in a certain area. How do we build on that? And then we go outside to say, we have checked the status quo. This is where we are at, and therefore we need external assistance, building from what we're starting. And as I said, currently you know that the president of Rwanda is driving Smart Africa, and we recently had our G7 meeting on digital transformation of Africa. And those are the things that we are saying as we march towards the AU meeting of the digital transformation of Africa, the development of the strategy. Let us say what is in place, what is not there, how do we work together. Therefore, we are invested, and of course, all governments in Africa have taken a decision that never again that our people must be left behind.
A united Africa is the way forward in the telecommunications sphere. Let's come back home to South Africa on a rather thorny issue, which is causing a lot of worries, the issue of the SABC, which has a mandate or a vast mandate of servicing even the most rural of communities. What sort of interventions are coming forth?
Well, as you know, as the department, we made that announcement. Minister of Finance made an announcement that we will provide certain funding to SABC, but they have to meet the conditions that have been set out. We recently jointly sent out a letter to SABC last week stipulating the things that have not been thoroughly addressed, and the board chair and his executive are aware of that. We're waiting for them to respond to those so that Treasury can then unleash the money that they're supposed to take out. You know that we had said we've sourced the services of GTech to assist technically in terms of assisting the turnaround plan, because every time government has to put money, there must be assurance that indeed the entity will not come back and ask for bailout. This is taxpayers' money. Therefore, if we're looking at a plan, we're not only looking at the situation now. We say, yes, SABC are in a crisis now, but how are you going to get out of this crisis? And how do you plan to sustain yourself beyond today? Those are the things that are in the plan. And as I said, jointly myself and Minister Ndabeni, we've returned to them to say, please address ABCD, look into that and that as identified by GTech, a technical team that was assisting SABC, because we did not work on that.
So as soon as they oblige, it's all systems go? It's
all waiting for that.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Minister.
Thank you so much.
And that's, of course, the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, speaking to us about the whole range of issues, including that of the upcoming World Radio Communication Conference in Egypt, and also issues of the SABC. As for us here in East London, I'll Vena and Yanga Funani. It's back to you in Joburg.